Working Cows Podcast, episode 189.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Conry, host of the Working Cows Podcast, powered by the Global Ag Network, here with another episode for you. Excited to be joined today by Zack Smith. Zack is one of the guys behind the stock cropping, or the Cluster Cluck 5000, and he's got some new iterations coming up for larger and smaller applications. We've talked to him before on the Working Cows Podcast. A link to his previous episode will be in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/189. But we're talking about integrating at scale and automated livestock into crop ground, which is really maybe something you've noticed I'm pretty passionate about and pretty excited about. So excited to talk to him today again about some of the scaling up and maybe some more of the philosophy behind this and how it's going to look on the land itself and where we're at in the process of seeing it scale up. So really excited to talk to Zack today about those things. Zack, thanks for joining me again today on the Working Cows Podcast.
Yeah, thanks again for having me.
So we talked in July of last year. The episode that I did with you released in August of last year, and so that was kind of the inaugural trip of the Cluster Cluck 5000. Is that still the affectionate name for the stock cropping unit?
Yeah. Nobody's banned us yet by repeating that name. So as long as that happens, we're gonna probably stick with it for a while.
Sounds good. So just kind of, if you'd give a couple of minute overview, our previous episode together was episode 151. So the show notes page for today is workingcows.net/189. Our previous episode will be linked there. But if you would just kind of give a couple of minute overview of what stock cropping is, and then how you got started doing it, and then we'll talk a little bit about where you're headed from here and some of the things that you learned last year, some of the things that you can talk about so that you've learned so far.
Yeah, got it. So stock cropping, for those that haven't seen it yet, is an idea that was born out of necessity a little over a year ago when commodity markets were at levels about at half of what they are today. So that's a key differentiator. But it was born out of the ideas of a couple farmers, relatively small, trying to find a way to come up with a different production system that solved some problems, both on a sustainability side as well as an economic side. And we focused looking at the ideas of strip intercropping. We were really interested in some of the benefits of that system and tried to find a way to juice that a little bit more. And so we had the idea of coming up with inserting animals into strip intercropping. And so what we did last spring was we designed and built what we believe is the world's first mobile grazing barn unit that houses multiple species of livestock. And we successfully paraded that through intercrop strips of corn last year, and raised 10 pigs, about 200 chickens, and I think 5 sheep and 2 goats is what we produced out of it last year, and ended up harvesting most everything and marketing those products direct to consumers, and had a heck of a lot of fun kind of along the way. So that's for those to get you up to speed. That's kind of the general overview of what we did last year.
And is it it's 20 feet wide? Is it like 30 feet long?
Yeah. So I can paint a better picture for folks. So the original barn that we will have out again this year it was 18 feet wide. It was meant to fit in a 20-foot wide grazing lane so that we had some clearance for our tires on the outside. And then the front, so it was a total of 33 feet long. So we had 3 sequential 11-foot segments. So the first segment was grazing outdoors for the ruminants. Then we had the shared barn structure that was split down the middle that housed both ruminants on one side and then the pigs on the other. And then behind that, we had a chicken tractor about 30 feet behind that we advanced manually to serve as kind of our fly larva control and our fourth species in the barn.
Goats and sheep first, then pigs, then chickens, about 3 days behind. What did you learn? What were some of the practical lessons that you learned from that exercise? I guess one of the things, how long were the rows that you guys were working on down now? One of the things that we talked about in the previous episode was 80-acre kind of, I'm assuming for the most part, 80-acre squares tend to be about the size of a typical field in Iowa. And so, that's just under 2,000 feet. If it's a square, it's just under 2,000 feet by 2,000 feet. So, how long were the rows that you guys were working down this year, or in the first year?
So this last year we had a small field that I usually have a corn plot on, and we set up 300 foot long strips, and we had 3 of those that we seeded to an annual pasture mix. And so we advanced, I should back up and say, we advanced the barn last year. At the time that we were talking in August, we were advancing at 11 feet every day. So it took about a month for the barn to travel that distance. And when the animals were smaller, one of the things we learned from that was that was about the right pace. But as the animals grew, their grazing requirement grew with it. And then the pigs, got more aggressive, especially with rooting activity, the bigger that they got. And so we sped up, and we were doing 2 moves a day when we got into the second half of August and then through September. And then we finished things up about the middle of October with the barn. But in reference to the 80-acre field schematic that I've kind of come up with as when we get to the point of being ready to scale, I think we would probably divide an 80-acre field up into 700-foot segments or blocks, so that we could. So the pattern I've set up for this year is the runs are going to be 750 feet long, and we're going to do 2 circulations, so 2 grazings planned. One with shorter movements in the first 45 days, and then we'll speed it up to finish things out with more movement on the last half. But we'll plan to graze everything twice is kind of the rough idea. So in an 80-acre field, we would have 3 blocks of barns, 3 750-foot lengths of row, sure, with alleyways probably in between to turn and motate on.
I confessed in our previous episode my row crop illiteracy, but now is about planting season, right? I mean, that's kind of, you guys are ramping up.
Yeah, I'm a seed dealer, and that's my main gig, and I am trying to keep people from planting because the conditions are super fit right now in Iowa, and it is colder than a well digger's ass, as they say in the business. So ground is really cold, but yeah, we're in the planting season. We get about to the middle of April, and that's when it becomes go time. So we've actually already seeded the stock cropper pastures. We seeded them about 10 days ago, but there's very little corn or soybeans that are planted so far this spring.
Sure. And when you say you seeded the stock cropper pastures, are those the strips that the stock cropper or the Cluster Cluck 5000 itself will go down?
That's correct. Yeah. We got all of those seeded along with some field peas and barley mix that we're going to try this year as well.
And what was the mix that you used in those areas?
Yeah, so the pasture mix is pretty similar to last year. So at least for the first 45 days. So we used a cool season mix for that. So we will have some oats and annual rye, some sorghum Sudan grass, rape, and I think field peas or cow peas, one of the two. I say rape.
Yep.
Yeah, something. A 5-way mix is what we've got there, and then the lesson we learned last year was that mix was great for the first month and a half, but then the oats started to mature. They choked everything else out. So we're going to plan on the second pass coming back that we're going to have a summer mix with, I think, a mix of maybe Sudan grass and some Japanese millet that will grow really vigorously and hopefully recover well after we graze across it, so that we can come back and hit that a second time. So that was one of the lessons we learned from last year, is that we've got to plan our grazing in the order of which from a timeline, when is the barn going to be there? Last year we had no idea on how fast we were going to advance things. We're a little bit smarter this year, but I think we'll be set up better with the plan that we have going into this year for sure.
Sure. One of the videos that you posted last year during the process, you mentioned Rick Bieber, who's been on a list of people I need to get on the podcast for a long time. But he was talking about, or you said that he had mentioned maybe speeding up the move. Was that just about the size of the animals and the amount of forage they were consuming, and leaving more residue, or what was that about?
Yeah, no, the speeding up the move is good criticism. What we did, a lot of the grazing that we had, we took it down too far, in my opinion, anyway. And I think that's what Rick and some others that came to my field day said, and I agree with them. I think ultimately, when we can, some of the things I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, but when we can get the programmable autonomous movement piece implemented this summer, is going to make that a lot more realistic, and we're going to have a lot better idea of how we could have a grazing program set up that would match the speed and be able, because we had to manually advance everything last year. We had to physically be there to operate a winch, and so I'm running 4 other businesses along with my full-time help, and we don't have time to just sit there all the time and move it. And so the ability to develop that technology where you wouldn't be grazing things down to a nub, so it takes too long to recover. Now, all of our lanes did recover, and we had beautiful, lush cover going into fall. For those that watched the harvest video that we did, they all did come back even without a lot of rain in northern Iowa last year. But Jason Mock talks a lot about operating and grazing and making the most of the key phase of the sigmoid curve, and allowing grazing stuff down quickly and then allowing it to recover and coming back and kind of hitting that sweet spot over and over again. And if you're really going to try to drive carbon into the ground too, that's a key thing, is to if you're going to advertise that as a benefit of the system, you can't get it down to all black like we had it last year. So that is one thing that I'm hoping that we can do a better job. And I'm hoping also it rains in Iowa this year. Last year we were, normally we get like 30 to 35 inches of rain. Some years it's been, 2 years ago it was like 45 inches of rain. Last year up until Labor Day, we had like 13 inches at our site. And then we got a 5-inch rain right before Labor Day. So, but I'm hoping with more normal rain, we're going in pretty dry right now, but I'm hoping that our grazing will cooperate more than what it did last year.
Any other changes as far as, or that you foresee as far as species, even of livestock, or is the sheep, goats, pigs, chickens mix the right mix?
Yeah, so that's a good segue into what am I going to be doing this year? So the project scope and what our evaluation site is, it's been moved, number one. So a lot of folks wanted to see us do it back on the same site. The reality was, for what we had kind of been planned for the project, we needed a bigger space to do it. And so I've moved it to one of my, I've got a 145 acre field that we're going to put it in the middle of. And it'll give it more visibility too. It's going to be on a state highway, and just gives us more. Yeah. So it really is going to pay to keep the animals in. I don't want to have a lawsuit come midsummer with things getting out. So that's a good engineering motivation right there. But it's going to give us a lot more visibility, and it's going to give us more space to operate. And it'll be a better venue for hosting a field day, likely later in the summer. But the biggest, the details of what we're doing different this year is we're going to have, the plan is for right now, at least 2 more barns And really what we're trying to illustrate this year with the field site is the scope of how this idea or concept can be scaled across multiple food growth platforms, whether you're a hobby farmer that has 5 acres and a couple acres of grass, on an acreage or something, and you want to grow your own chickens and pork, or you want to put a cow out in front or some sheep and some goats and have it be like a Roomba and manage your land for you that way, and be able to, produce your own meat. Coming out of COVID, I think there's a lot more interest in stuff like that. So from a small scale in a barn half the size or a little bit less than half the size of the barn we built last year, all the way up to, we'll have the existing barn from last year, so the 18 or 20 foot or whatever you want to call it. And then we will have what I am very pleased, the new name, not the Cluster Cluck 5000, but the Cluster Cluck Max 9. That's my iteration name for the big one this year. So that is going to be the big boy 30 footer that's currently getting built at a fabricator. And the reason for being bigger was if this was going to scale at a field level, finding equipment to manage the intercrop dynamics in between of like corn and beans or corn and field peas, it's really hard to find stuff narrower than 15 feet and make it work for most people with regular machinery. And so that was the reason for going up to that width, was being able to manage, either 15 or 30 foot implement swaths for doing the row crops in that type of a situation, rather than the 8 row combination with the other barn. So we'll have a 30 footer, a 20 footer, and then roughly about a 10 footer, all intercrop this year. And we're going to have our intercrop crops will be different as well. We'll have field peas and barley, that mix. We're going to try that for the first time. That was a Rick Beaver suggestion, with the idea of that being something potentially where the system could grow the food stuff that we could harvest and grind and feed back to the animals the next year. We're also going to do a corn or half corn, half soybean mix. And all the corn will be managed like last year to maximize the edge effect, higher population, extra nitrogen on the outside rows to drive yield there. And then I may do some crazy stuff off to the side too. I was talking yesterday. I was on a Zoom call talking to Bob Recker and Joe Bassett and Lauren Steinlage about doing some really small stuff, some 60-inch corn, 90-inch corn, and we might build some, really, really small stuff to experiment around and be able to demonstrate that at the field day too. So from an animal species side, it's going to be different in every barn set, to your original question. So you've got a lot of cattle folks that are interested, and I promised that last time I talked that we were going to do that, and that's why the big barn is going to have 2 calves. I think they're going to be about 300 pounds when they start, and then they'll have pigs behind that. And I'm also going to try to integrate into the big barn a laying hen component, and we may have them running with the cattle I'm leaning on, and then building a nesting box into the side of the barn to see how that works with them scratching the pies and getting along with them. And then the middle barn, like we had last year, will be the same. It'll be sheep and goats, pigs, and then chickens behind. And then the small Cluster Cluck, haven't settled in a name for that one yet. Joe Bassett came up with the Cluster Cluck Nano this morning when we were talking, which I kind of like. That will have, at least for this first year, it'll be just sheep and goats out front as ruminants, and a chicken tractor attached to behind. So just 2 species in that. So again, kind of a spectrum of different ways to use it. And I think as we try to commercialize this thing, everybody is going to have a different want. And what we're trying to design right now is a base unit that has modular options that you can fit on for different folks' needs, where their application, or to match the application that they want with this thing. So, but that's kind of in a nutshell what the 2021 setup and test site is going to look like.
I really enjoy hearing the guy who is innovating a new way of doing something, saying, this is the crazy thing that we're going to do this year. That's good. That's good. You're not resting on your laurels. You're continuing to push the envelope. So that's good.
No, it's no fun. It gets boring too fast.
Yeah. And I really like the move to put it next to a state highway. When you said it was going to be in the middle of the field, I said, will they be able to see it from the state highway, and so it's good to keep the people looking, those rubberneckers. Hopefully the issues aren't with people rear-ending each other looking at what you got going on out there in the field. So
yeah, that's a good, I should probably check with my attorney, maybe additional liability protection. My mom and dad want to put a sign up because it's on the home farm, and I don't know if we're going to do that. I think the 30-foot barn in the middle of the field will probably drown us.
Yeah, well, they want to put a sign up, not responsible for my son's ideas, or
They wanted to do that for about 40 years. So.
I know we're prior to planting for 2021, but is it too early to talk about some of the benefits that you saw for the actual plot that you had them on last year, and some of kind of a debrief of what you saw last year?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. No, we haven't done anything with the site from last year, but I have been over to it just to see how well did things winter kill. Because that was the piece. The idea here is that you rotate, you do annual pasture with animals, let them lay the manure down, and then you rotate it and put the feedstuff crop there and get the benefit of that. And but you've got to make sure if you're going to grow the row crop that you don't have a solid mat of grass that you've got to try to manage into and plant that and handle that challenge. But there were a few things, and I'm assuming it's potentially some of the annual rye that survived. It appears to be, to me anyway, on some of my headlands, but the strips themselves were pretty free and clear, and feel like I could go in and plant them relatively easily here in the next week or two when things warm up. But I am going to document the difference. I'm going to plant all corn back to that field this year, and it's going to be really interesting to see what, if any, differences in the physical expression of the plants as they're growing into the goodness that where the barn passed. At least I'm hoping that we see something. I don't want to assume that, but it's going to be really interesting to see the difference between, what will be corn on corn or corn on cluster cluck strips to see how. And I'll make sure I will have several snippets about that throughout probably from starting in June. We should start seeing differences, I would think, if we're going to in early June with corn by then. So,
any other surprises? Anything from that whole previous year's experiment that kind of stands out to you as a lesson learned or a surprise? Or what about animal yield or anything like that?
As far as the animals themselves, with what we got out, we didn't lose anything. It was just unbelievable. When we last spoke, we were only about a month into it, and then we finished. I think we pulled everything off. We had to market the pigs early, so we had lower butcher weights than I'd like. I usually like growing my pigs to 3 to 330 before we harvest them, but it was like everything else last year. We had a butcher slot open up, and we had to take it when they said. And so we harvested the pigs at about 250, 260 pounds. And then the chickens, we ran in, and we've got, one of the downsides with this system is that if our second crop was going to finish the end of October. Well, as the weather got colder, their energy efficiency, went down, and so they weren't growing as fast. And then we picked up 4 or 5 inches of snow, and we basically had to just pull the plug and move them inside to a barn for the last, 10 days of finishing, just because we couldn't move the chicken tractors with 6 inches of snow on the ground or keep the waters unfrozen. So that piece we may have to move the chickens up a little bit to make sure we're not dealing with really inclement weather. The sheep and the goats did fine. We didn't have any issues with them. I actually kept two of the sheep ewes back, and we just had some lambs in the last month, and that was a really fun process. And I just had triplets on one of my goats here last week, and so we're going to have some of our own breeding stock that are going to get pumped back into the system here this spring as well. So
sure, what piqued my interest to reach out to you again and get you back on the show was a video that you put up on your great YouTube channel that we will also have embedded at the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/189. And you were talking more about new manufacturing relationships and the kind of the scaling process and some of those things you've already mentioned today. The autonomy piece, I'm not sure if you've mentioned today the solar power piece. Is that still the plan to kind of work towards a solar powered autonomous mobile barn?
Yeah, 100% it is. So so I should maybe address some of that news here that you referenced. So in the last couple of weeks, it's actually been in motion since early January probably, but we announced here in my last YouTube video a week or 10 days ago that Stockcropper Inc. and Dawn Equipment, or their under company called Underground Agriculture, which is owned and operated by Joe Bassett, which a lot of folks in agriculture will know who he is. We decided to make a partnership where they're going to serve as the engineering, design, and manufacturing wing of our company, the Stockcropper. And so I'm really excited about that partnership. Joe is an incredibly creative and talented individual that's kind of forging his own path in the machinery business, following up his father's legacy. And it was really interesting. I referenced this in my Twitter feed a few weeks or a little bit after that announcement. He gave a speech or a presentation in Berlin a couple weeks before the idea that the Stockcropper came to fruition. And I hadn't seen it until after we'd hatched the idea, but a lot of the principles that he talked about in that presentation align very, very closely to kind of the same future vision of agriculture that I have, with the mechanical world intersecting with the biological world. And so it's been an incredibly, I think, good marriage. And so we're in the process right now of doing that initial design. And so we're starting with the Cluster Cluck Nano, if we're going to term it that, the smaller version of the barn, where we're trying to get that built out and designed, and add in some additional features that are going to be really exciting, including the solar powered and autonomous guidance and advancement control. And none of this stuff is super easy to do, and nobody's done anything like this before. Especially, there's solar powered autonomous vehicles out there, but when you try to incorporate multiple species of livestock systems into that and moving across a field, that puts a lot of complication. But as of today, the middle of April, we're on a really good path, and I'm hoping that we're going to have the plan is right for now, and this will be good. I can put some pressure on Joe, but we're going to have hopefully a couple of these barns produced and in the field by the middle of June. And one of them is going to be out at Jason Mock's in Indiana, and it's going to be featured at his field day if everything goes according to plan. So, and the goal is that after we figure out kind of the base level on the small version, that we can take that across all the different iterations. And, when I talk about the programmability of grazing and all of those things, that, having somebody that understands that way better than I do is going to get us there a lot faster. And so I'm really excited about kind of the marriage between the two entities. Sure.
Yeah. So Joe, if you're listening to this, it's probably going to come out somewhere around the week of May 10th. You got a month, I guess. But yeah, so let's talk about what this looks like. I don't know, 5 years in the future, on an 80-acre piece. And in the previous episode, you mentioned having 30 barns out there. Let's just talk through kind of some of the the differences in how the strategy of a typical 80-acre field in Iowa would look versus how the stock cropper field would look, and then how what kind of a yield given today's prices you would be looking at as far as a difference. Kind of maybe even walk through a year in the life of a stock cropper.
Yeah, okay, I can do that. So, for those that are not from Iowa or familiar with major row cropping areas, Iowa's pretty simple. For the most part, it's either you've got a field of corn or a field of soybeans on either side of the fence. And then in my neck of the woods, really the only livestock we have for the most part is hog confinements, with 2,000 to 4,000 animals in one spot. And so that's kind of the way Iowa agriculture has evolved into. So most row crop farmers don't have an active interest in livestock anymore. Some of them may have confinement barns, but in most of the cases, they usually hire out other help to actually chore the animals. They don't own the animals, an integrator does. So stock cropper is very much a pretty stark juxtaposition to that, and the fact that we're going to not just have one crop in the field, we're going to have like 5 or 6 or 7, all growing at the same time, and multiple species of livestock. And we're not going to be hauling our manure out to the field. The manure is going to haul itself, coming right out the hind end of the animal, and going to be distributed in a disciplined fashion across the field so that the next crop can take advantage of it. So at a macro level, that's really the difference of what it would look like. So I've come up, and this is really initial stuff. Like, I want to be careful on like promising that this is what it's going to be, but in my initial modeling that I've come up with, there would be roughly about 30 barns, okay, on the farm. And if we made them all like last year and everything was to work out, that would produce about 450 pigs, 9,000 chickens, and if we did sheep and goats, it'd be roughly about the same, 400 to 500 of a mix of that species. Or if we did it on a cattle basis, we'd probably, I don't know. It's really going to come down. Cattle is my weak point. So if I sound stupid talking about it, it's because I've never grown them before this year. But I would hope that we could maybe have 20 barns. I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 cattle going across that if we were able to keep up on the grazing. But that gives you kind of an idea on numbers. And so from what would that look like as far as a work need from a farm operation standpoint? You'd have to be out checking the animals every day. So there would be a need for a human being. Even with the autonomous stuff, you still need to be there. It's still livestock farming. I had a conversation the other day and somebody's like, well, wouldn't it be nice if you just wouldn't have to ever go out and check them for like 3 or 4 days at a time? I'm like, well, that's just not how it works. You've got to have somebody out there with that human, no, you can't have, there's no amount of sensors that can overcome having a human being still involved with it. Now, but if we can make it so that the barns advance on their own and take out some of that labor so that the farmer can focus on the husbandry part of it, that's really what we'd like to see. And so the idea was that, a lot of people spend, 2, 3, 4 hours a day at their hog barns. It'd be the same thing with this, so that you would chore, maybe in the morning and make sure that everything is watered and fed. And we're going to have to build some systems to allow that, maybe on a, like a Polaris Ranger or UTV type of device to facilitate that. But that's really what it would look like throughout the growing season. You'd have to you'd either have to background your own stock animals, to put in the system, or acquire them from somebody else. And so there's something that needs to probably be built out there as well. If I was doing this myself, I think I would just get my own, breeding stock and do all that stuff in-house, ideally. And I think what else? Yeah, I think that would be a lot what the year would look like, and the idea, at least initially, would be a late May through as the pasture got big enough to graze, move the animals through the end of the growing season, and then outside of cattle, the idea would be that you would have everything finished in that window of time. So, And, some folks say, well, how are you going to do that? You need to keep animals producing all the time or, around the clock. Well, in the conventional system you do, but, the economics in this thing are different, assuming that you can market these in a way toward consumers that you don't have to be pumping the system at max. And it's a lot like what they used to do a long time ago, like with pig production. They would, save their best gilts, in the fall and save them back and breed them and farrow them the next spring. And then they'd butcher them after that. And they just had this cycle, because that's what they didn't have, barns with LP furnaces heating everything to a temp. You farrowed when you had the right set of temperatures for the animals to have good luck with it. So, so from a financial standpoint, I did a video, and I'd recommend if folks really want to see me get into the nitty gritty, I did a video back in December, I think, on how we shook out with the system. And I'm not going to go into a ton of details there, but other than to say, utilizing average USDA pasture raised prices for hanging weights of what we produced. This system had a net profit over just commodity corn, I think, by about $1,200 an acre. So with my stock crop or corn crop, we grew 262 bushel corn an acre off of that from that added bump. That was probably about 50 bushel an acre over what average was, in my local geography with corn on corn anyway this year. So we had a nice bump there, and I figured like $4 corn last fall. Now it's obviously way higher than that, but it's all relative, I guess. But we still, but the stock cropper acre itself, with the animals, produced a net revenue of like, I think it was $2,100 or $2,200 an acre. And so when you average those 2 acres against each other, it was about a $1,200-$1,300 an acre profit. And, the fun thing about that, that sounds awesome, but, there's more to that, I think, that we can get out of the system from an efficiency standpoint. I don't think we really had everything maximized. So I'm encouraged for what that is. And you do the math on that, on how that shakes out. I think it becomes more possible to see how you don't have to have 3,000 acres to make a living in this system.
Yeah,
might be plenty.
That was the most exciting thing, I think, about what you said last time we talked, was, we're talking a family supported on a couple hundred acres instead of a couple thousand, I think is kind of how you put that. And so that's cool.
That was the goal when we started it. When corn was $2.70 a bushel, and you're trying to figure out how to feed your family on, even 1,000 acres. It's like, yeah, this isn't going to work. And so, I'm happy that we've had this boom in commodity prices, but this isn't my first rodeo. I know how this goes. It's already starting to happen. All of our inputs are starting to rise. Land rents, land in Iowa is selling for $15,000 an acre already. We eat ourselves up every time there's an opportunity, and I'm not going to get bamboozled by that. I know what's coming.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Yeah, so that's very, very cool, very interesting stuff. Do you have a sense of kind of what each species contributes to that economic impact? Are the chickens the driver? That would be my guess, but are they the driver in that, or are all of
it? Yeah, in the system last year, the chickens and the pigs were by far the driver. They're easy to market. Everybody loves chicken and pork. Sheep and goats is a lot tougher market.
Yep.
That's why I was really interested in trying to figure out how to get a beef, product into it, because that would help you bat the cycle as far as at least American consumption goes. But the cattle thing is a different dynamic. You're not going to finish, a cow out in, a 6-month period, right? And so. I'm trying to figure out how that would work. If we could just do some winter grazing on the field itself, set up some fencing, and then come back and finish it. But that's why I'm starting with 300 pounders. Is I don't know if we built something that's going to take, starting with 1,000-pound animal to finish finish out to get 1,400 pounds. Probably, again, I don't know a lot about cattle, but I get kind of spooked about that size of stuff with the pens that we've got created here. So, but we're going to figure it out, one way or the other. And I've got a really good friend that's a local cattleman just up the road that we're going to be working with to kind of give me some guidance on that as well. So.
I think most people would say that if you're keeping sheep and goats in, you're like way more than halfway to keeping cows in, or you're maybe even beyond keeping cows in. So it's
right.
And most animals, in my experience, really, they will stay in if they're not hungry, and given the amount of forage you're growing, they're probably going to be doing pretty well. But yeah, so I really appreciate your time today. I do want to hear a little bit about how you think this plays into, soil health, carbon markets, some of those things, some of those conversations that are kind of ramping up maybe, or continuing to develop and evolve in the agricultural sector in the United States.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. The thing, I've had that, I don't know if you asked me the question last year or somebody did about like, well, how am I banking on other programs like financing this or subsidizing this? And I'm really not, to be honest with you. I want whatever we're going to produce out of this to be such a clear difference to the end user and the consumer that we're able to capture the premium on the merit of the product and how we're growing it and delivering it to folks. And so, the carbon credit thing has really become huge in the last, 3 or 4 months since the election and the change of administration. And, to be honest, my honest opinion on it is, a year or two ago, I was kind of excited about that with some of my other farming practices on my conventional acres, thinking that I was going to, come into some money there. But now it turns out that folks that have already adopted those practices aren't going to get paid for them. So if you were innovative and kind of trying to do the right thing from the get-go, thanks for your time, but we're only interested in buying changed acres. So that has me a little bit sour on them. And also, I think I don't think in the iterations they have coming out right now that they're really going to achieve the goal of actually addressing climate issues. The idea of paying me to plant a cover crop so that, some oil company can, do something negative. I don't see that as, it's just a lot of greenwashing to me in a lot of ways. And if we're going to say we're going to do something, let's figure out how to do something. And part of me as a farmer, I'm really motivated. I don't understand why we have to pay farmers in some cases to do things that are in their long-term best interest with their asset. And I likened it, I had a conversation a few weeks ago with somebody, and I said, we don't pay people to wax their tractors. We shouldn't pay people from keeping their ground from eroding or, over the long term. So, and that's the same. It's the same thing to me. It's taking care of your asset and what you have. And, I think farmers should be naturally inclined to do that without being prodded or having carrots held out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that, and I appreciate that perspective. So when do you anticipate the first 20 of these are going to land in somebody's field other than yours? And when I say of these, I'm referring to the autonomous self-driving, self-moving kind of a deal. Do you have a timeline? Are you not willing to say we're going to do it by this date? And I don't want to pressure you or anything. I'm just wondering how you're thinking about those things.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you do press me, because that's good. We need the pressure, to be honest with you, because we need to move on. There's definitely demand. I've had every week this winter since last fall, I've had people reaching out, contacting me, wanting to know. The goal is right now that we're going to, hopefully by the first part of June, have 3 of these things kicked out. One of them is going to go to my place, one to Jason Mock's, and then there's a winery near Iowa City, Iowa, called the Walker Homestead that I have committed to get one to run between their grapevines, which I think, like vineyards, orchards, there's a huge opportunity for something like this, or even people with windbreaks, with vegetation in between that they want to run something like this. So that's the plan, at least initially. And then I've got a whole slug of other people that if time allows, I'd like to produce 10 more this summer if we have the bandwidth. Getting steel right now is a huge problem, and the cost of it is a huge problem right now compared to a year ago. So that's complicating things a little bit. Assuming things go well with our autonomous development, there's a lot of ifs. So I want to, put that caveat out there. But if those things go well and we have a good summer, I very much would have the ability to produce a whole bunch of these things next winter. If we can be confident in the design that we're going to have something that's going to work for people, not be frustrating, but be very functional and empower people to do that stuff. I'm really hoping by next winter, that we'd be able to, potentially, make and sell a couple hundred of these things to get them out to folks. So.
Very cool. Any other changes as far as that's concerned? Format, function, materials, any of those things? It's all pretty much as you built it the first time. I know you said it was heavy. People raised questions about the cost of it or the expense of heavier materials. All that kind of performed as you desired, and is the right level of durability?
Yeah, it's a good question. We said it was heavy, but even with the new iterations, you got to make it strong. Okay. And that's working with other engineering folks now, it's coming back with the same thing. So I think we'll see. This first iteration, we want to make sure, especially for the first sales, we want to make sure it works. But we'll definitely be trying to find ways to lighten and cheapen it up. But again, there's a lot of things we're trying to do with this piece, and it's not the same thing as just making a Saladin style chicken tractor for $500. There's more complexity and more things we're asking it to do, and so we're trying to balance all that stuff because we know that it needs to be strong, but it needs to be yet affordable so that it makes sense for folks, and that's really a key driver for us right now.
Yeah, well, really, really cool stuff. I really appreciate the time today. Really looking forward to seeing how this continues to develop, and looking forward to seeing it come to market and see it out in folks' fields. Are there any other major nuggets that you want to cover today, or anything else that you want to promote? Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. I know we'll have links to all that. Anything else?
No, not right now. I appreciate you giving me time and space into your following that you have, and grateful for that. I've got, if you're going to have links to all the social media stuff, we're on Twitter, our YouTube page. That's the only plug I'd like to have. I'm getting really close to 1,000 subscribers. So if you have not subscribed to my channel, I'd like to be able to live stream our barn with a webcam or cell phone this 24/7 this year. So if you could give me a subscription there and pay attention, we'll once we get the barn launched in probably early June, hopefully, we'll be coming out with YouTube episodes usually once every week to 10 days is what I try to put content out for. And for those of you that are interested in maybe obtaining some meat, we are going to be doing pre-sales on meat. I've actually hired an intern that's going to be in charge of trying to do more of that right off the get-go. So be watching for that as well. But otherwise, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, we're on all those platforms if you search the Stock Cropper.
All right. We will have links to all those things in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/189, and encourage people to go and subscribe, get that subscriptions up over 1,000. And thank you, Zack, for taking some time during a busy season. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks, Clay.
Again, show notes page for today, workingcows.net/189. Go check that out and find the links relevant to today's episode up there. And looking forward to next week. Going to talk to Rockside Ranch, Craig of Rockside Ranch in Etna, California, and Gordon of the new Rockside Ranch that's coming online in around New Underwood, South Dakota. So some exciting things happening there. And what is Rockside Ranch? What's it all about? It's a recovery ministry for men in crisis. And so really excited to see how getting connected to the land and getting connected to the family of God is really making an impact in these young men's lives. So that's what we're going to talk about next week on the Working Cows podcast for episode 190. We will see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.